one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Okay, next on the agenda is approval of the agenda.
So moved?
Thank you. And is there any discussion? I think I remembered. None? Mr. DeMarco?
Ms. Mast?
Yes.
Dr. Lefay?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes. Thanks. Okay, item 3, board discussion. Dr. Tapman?
Yeah, so we have 2 items tonight that I'd like to spend a little more time on here in the work session. The first here is this student liaison to the board. So a couple months ago, we passed a policy for student liaison to the board, increased student engagement at the board level. I met with student council, and then last meeting we had Lucy Watson come, and she did an excellent job. Without really knowing too much of what she was to do, she did an excellent job. So I really wanted to take a little bit of time tonight for the board to have discussion about what do we expect out of this student liaison, and just so as we go month by month, it'll get a little bit better, a little more robust each time. So I guess that's kind of the first item for us to discuss. Linked on the agenda item is a record that the students created, the student council students created, gave some thoughts and ideas. And I really, that's one thing we need to talk about. I think some board members are thinking, I don't want to speak for you, but it's going to be like a student who's committed to coming to every meeting, and we'll get a high level of engagement and interaction from that student, who will then take information back to the student council and then bring student council information to us. I think the students are kind of thinking that, hey, I come to a meeting or two and then someone else rotates in, right? And so maybe they have 2 students. One was at the previous meeting and the next one, so they have a friend. You could be braver when you have a friend. And also, we recognize we have nearly 90% of our students at the high school engaged in extracurricular activities, whether that's arts or athletics. And so our students are busy. And when they're in season, they're really busy. When they're out of season, they might have more time that they could commit to attending a couple meetings. But if we're thinking, no, we want a student who's really going to be engaged and be at this board level, and it does take multiple meetings to start to get like the flow of it. Then we can tell the kids that's really what we're hoping to get. But I guess I'll turn it over to you guys for discussion, because that's not the only thing. But like, do we want the kid listed as a report out on the agenda? Because right now we have like a building presentation and then Julie, Paul, and I. So do we add a student in there, or do I just embed them as part of my presentation or my report out time? What do we want the student to go back to student council with and share? What do we want them to ask student council to bring to us? Those kind of things. So it's open for discussion.
Well, you can go ahead. I can.
Oh, it's okay. Go ahead, John.
I was going to say, I got the feeling in the presentations that I have been at, that wasn't the first time I'd heard, it was more of a dedicated person. It was actually like a member of the board. And that being said, I certainly understand, and I don't know what size school districts. So, as James said, that might have a lot to do with the time commitment, which I fully understand. I guess I wonder if we could get both worlds, and I wonder if we could try to urge somebody that would be here, understanding that sometimes they can't. I mean, it's like us. If something comes up, you just can't be here. But maybe we could have to. Maybe that person could rotate, just as a, and then perhaps if that one person can't make it, maybe they could come. You know what I mean? I don't know. I guess that's where I'm envisioning more of a dedicated person that we would get to know more, that we could talk with and say, how are we doing, or what are we not doing? What aren't we seeing that we need to act, or or get to know, or something? Because we're not there at any of the schools, not to run the school, but just to get like, how do you think we're doing?
So I guess my question would be, are you doing student cabinet or superintendent's cabinet?
So, great question. I have not started that this year.
Okay.
Every superintendent I talk to, they're like, you have to do it. And I'm like, I'm going to do it. They also say, don't start it in your first year. There's a lot to learn, a lot to do. And so, so that will be coming, but it hasn't happened yet. No.
So I guess I'm wondering, is it duplicitous to have superintendent cabinet and a school board liaison from student council? Because I think there will be some crossover there, right? Because that's a time for you to have candid conversations with students, and you'll decide what students you want to engage in that in that kind of arena. But I'm wondering if it's more advantageous for you personally to engage students in that superintendent cabinet than for a student to come here and sit here for a school. I don't know. I'm just thinking they're both really valuable.
I would say,
but
yeah,
are they recreating the same thing?
Right. I would almost say that if there was a dedicated student, that student and I would be designing the agenda and talking points and whatnot for that cabinet, that student cabinet. And then I think it is still good to hear directly from the student. Yeah, with Dr. Tatman, we did X, Y, and Z, and this came out. Other things that were talked about was it just so you have that true student perspective. I mean, I can report back what students say or feel or think, but to hear it from the kids themselves is good. And
I think in the idea of one of the things that I think, James brought to the district is the idea of really involving stakeholders, and they're our biggest stakeholder. And to be able to hear from them directly, and so while in real time we're discussing things, they might have a question that they want to understand about district governance, and they could bring a perspective that none of us would have or understand or think to ask. That could prompt new discussion and new insights to things that could just inform our decisions a little bit in a different way than if they weren't actually here to be part of the discussions.
I just wondered because I know like you said, students are busy. I know student cabinet met during school. It wasn't an after school event. It's during
They have lunch or something?
I think it's during the lunch period.
right, yeah,
That's how it was.
my
done
understanding was,
before.
was at the high school level, and it wasn't necessarily kids on student council. It was
Right.
others were recruited,
Correct.
and that's where I think if this student liaison is more funneled through the student council, then the superintendent's cabinet would be a different audience, and if that student's with me, then so yeah, I'm sure there will be times it'll feel like duplicity, but I think other times it would be good. Again, student council is like the formal student group, and then the superintendent's cabinet could be a makeup of other student, demographics or whatever. So yeah.
While I think we may want a dedicated person, I just having an inside source on student council at my house, I think kids are loath to kind of make that commitment just yet, or they just can't do it. So I wonder, for our sake, at least starting, if student council is able to send one student, and then as a body, they're able to kind of discuss and give feedback, or if we know that we're going to have, so we'll say the dress code, for example, we've got a topic that we think we would love their feedback on. we could float that ahead of time. Maybe they bring it up in their student council meeting, and then they have one person come and kind of represent the student council. I don't know that that one person needs to be this. It'd be ideal if it would, but realistically, I don't know that it needs to be the same person every time for us to get that value of getting that voice of the customer being the student. I think they could probably trade off based on who's available and maybe who's passionate about a particular issue too. You know what I mean? Depending on the subject, there might be different people stepping forward. I think bringing one kid and getting them realistically to show up to everything would be a big ask.
So would you also maybe envision, I'm not asking just you, but more and more of us perhaps doing, like at the beginning of the school year, doing some kind of orientation
what I
with
was thinking.
everybody in student council, so they're not like walking in here,
Yeah.
kind of like cold turkey last month, and maybe then I could see that work. Like, oh, Joe, can you go this month because I can't. He has either something in front of him, or he has a good idea of what is going to take place or what he needs to do.
Maybe we even show up during school to one of the student council
That's-
meetings and
Mention that to James,
Mhm.
kind of as a thought.
yeah, no, I think that'd be good.
And then rotating people, to me, would be a lot less stressful on them.
Yeah.
And there's pros and cons to each, right? Each kid gets an experience of it this way. Yeah.
And I think the superintendent's cabinet, whatever we call it, that really is James's resource, right? And this would be our resource. And while undoubtedly there might be overlap, I do like the idea because student council tends to capture like the same. Sometimes you run the risk of asking the same students who we know step forward a lot, but then we kind of miss a whole section of students who probably, unless they're approached, maybe wouldn't step forward because that's not how they're wired, right? And I'm sure in your case, James, you're going to want a cross section that's a little more diverse than maybe just what student council is.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, you summarized that well. It is not the attachment.
I must
Missing
be
an
the
eye.
file.
It says student liaison to the board.
Fix that and replace
I mean, does this help, or how are we? Did you go to student council for
Yes.
this person, or did we?
Well, I went once and talked with the students, and then they created that that Google Doc that I titled, and I need to circle back with them, and they meet every other Wednesday, so the last couple Wednesdays I've had a conflict, so I just need to find time to get it done.
And even if you want to send kind of one of us for this purpose, be happy to, get in front of them and just maybe talk, if that's what we're deciding, maybe talk about that, and then kind of open up that two-way that, like, hey, in a meeting, you guys are always welcome, right, to bring something to us. And then the other way, there might be things that we want to bring to you that we want your feedback or opinion on.
Yeah, so I would say if there's two, because we have two board members who want to do that this Wednesday, I believe they meet. They meet at 2:30. I'd get there a little early so you beat the traffic, because it's right after school.
Is that what we call it? Yeah.
Yeah, so
Tempest.
Wednesday.
I'm gonna be there. I know I'm gonna be there anyway. That's the letter of intent.
Signing, yeah, the sports signing.
And I don't know. I mean, if Wednesday is too, like, if that's, I guess we're here, fine. But like, if that's too soon for them, or if we'd be better off floating the idea and then coming to a meeting in a couple of weeks and they've had a chance to talk about it and think about it.
School's gonna be out in a couple of weeks. That's what I was thinking, because
They might only have this week and one more. I would, yeah, because then seniors are done on the 19th. Yeah. Commencement's 26th. So I would guess we have, and the other thing is we can circle back in August or September when they're back, because then that's the group that's going to be kind of with us. I mean, if we meet with them this month and then it's a whole new president, vice president, everything else, it might be like, okay, we got to start over anyways. So I'm good with that plan too.
Maybe,
I'm gonna be there, let me know. I mean,
All right.
I could still be there while you were talking about what we just talked about.
Sure.
I mean,
Right.
maybe starting in August is a good idea, cause it's, like you said, fresh faces and it gives people, you know, the whole school year to plan.
It's a good-
That works. It was good.
Thanks. And is that anything else?
No, I
That
would
was
just say, so we'd be ready for like an OSBA presentation, maybe in fall of
November.
24.
I'm glad you brought that up because
Oh.
the subject did come up at the board leadership institute. And our vice president, assistant director of OSBA, asked if everybody that does this can supply a name to them, because apparently she wants to have some kind of, I don't know, and my only hesitation, I mean, I didn't say anything, I said, fine, my only hesitation was, number one, we just started, and again, not knowing who it's going to be, I don't know that I should send her Lucy's name. I mean, I could find out more to see what OSBA is mine, but I still found it interesting that they have moved it to a different level. That apparently enough people are doing it that they want to.
Recognize it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Well, that's why I didn't give it a name on it.
It'd be interesting if they are creating like a collaborative of the existing students that do it. So you have some districts that have been doing it for decades, and then if those other students could get ideas from them, and it could be interesting.
I could just visit with her just to see what she's got in mind. And then if there's nothing else presented to the Zoom. You want to talk to me?
Yeah. All right. Yeah, if you find out more, that'd be great. Ready for the next item?
I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
All right, so the next one is, we've talked a lot about district communication. And so, increasing that communication cycle helps create transparency of the great things that Huron's doing, tell accurate information of what's going on in the district for the community, and not just parents, but the community at large, right? So I don't know the percent, but there's a large percent of community residents that do not have students in the schools. And so their connection with the schools is limited. So one way to help bridge that is through strong communications. And there's a couple different ways to go with this. Right now, larger districts, other districts, not necessarily even larger, but other districts have like a true dedicated communication, director of communications, communication officer person. So that could be something that we discuss. My hesitation with that is we're not really in a financial position to be adding staff, and we're actually trying to trim where we can. That's appropriate. So there's that option. The other is there's another district near us that does have a director of communications, and I've talked a little bit with him and his superintendent. He is willing to do some freelance work. I would think that would always be, we'd be second as far as on his to-do list to his primary employer. And the work I see him do from his district is good work. It doesn't blow me away necessarily, but so if we had specific projects that we want to do, like if we said, man, our website's really out of shape, like out of date, inaccurate information, and he'd be able to give us some guidance or direction, we're still the ones doing the work because we have the content and we know the information. So that's one option. The other is there are some districts that get a third-party consultant. And so I've talked with one, and they're willing to help us out. They have robust services. They offer, it's not just a person helping us; it's their team. So they have different specialty areas. and they could help with clear and accurate communication, both written or through email, but also through social media. They help manage the social media platform, ensuring that promotions and talking about the positives going on in the district flow in a functional way. But again, that comes with a cost. So when I saw that cost, I was like,
That's a full-time staff person.
well,
Including benefits.
it might be before benefits. Yeah.
Ooh.
So I guess I just wanted, as a group, for us to discuss, like, where do we want to start? How do we want to go? I know I've been trying to be more communicative with parents. The other is that, trying to get out like a community newsletter, I would think twice a year. Luann did an excellent job doing some research. Loris? That's the printer, right? Yeah, so Loris Printing could do that type of service for us, but we'd have to provide all the content and formatting. And after print and postage, it'd be about $2,000 for us to mail one to every household in the district. So again, that price point was personally a little high. I know districts that have done that in the past, they've done like a mailer to every residence, are moving the way of digital. So through social media, through email, and other means, they'll post out, here's a link to our most recent newsletter. It saves on that print cost and mailing cost, but you maybe don't hit all the audience that you did with that mail, with the flyer. So I'm open to ideas or thoughts.
What are we wanting to communicate? What word are we wanting to get out that would, I don't know, I guess what's the starting point of what we're trying to communicate?
So I think for me, the starting point is just, there's a lot of great things going on with staff and student engagement, student learning, and we don't always hear all those stories. And sometimes when there's no story, then it's like, oh, they must not be doing anything. Well, we're so busy doing the great stuff that we don't take the time to pause and showcase ourselves. Not all, but a lot of times teachers are humble, so they don't necessarily want to put themselves out there to say, hey, look at this cool thing. So that'd be one. The other is that I know we have master facility conversations coming, and there has to be community engagement for that, so that we start developing a shared vision of what is the Huron Schools facilities going to look like for the next 30 to 50 years. And so help with communicating those themes and those topics. And then also just being more transparent with finances and clearly and accurately communicating finances so that people understand where we're at and why we can or can't do what we're doing. As far as, if we start limiting services or, when we went to pay to participate, right, that was kind of a hot button item. People were like, why do you need this? I don't understand. And so just explaining better those finances, I think would help with that communication loop with the community. Yeah.
So here's a crazy thought. I mean, very crazy thought. So what if that communication piece was somehow woven into the student liaison for the school board, and that could be some kind of reporting out, I don't know, a student opportunity to do a writing piece, or I mean, I don't know how often you envision this communication going out, if it's once a quarter or once a semester, or I don't know, but
I don't think that addresses the issue of what medium to use. That's a good thought. Like does the
I guess I was thinking like digital,
Yeah,
something
so that-
digital, not print.
And I respect what you're saying about reaching the community members that aren't digital. I was wondering, if we're stakeholder conversations about master buildings, things, it'd probably be more advantageous to do it more. So maybe utilizing the library in the city has offered, right, to include us in.
Yeah. So the city does I don't know if it's quarterly or twice a year, they do like a community flyer. It talks about all the services they do. They've offered that we could join that mailing, half page or a full page. And so that is something that we could join. I know sometimes we want to be cautious or mindful that we are distinctly different than the city and the township, right? We're three separate entities. And so by us being included in, which I think is a nice offer from them, could that be like confusing for a typical resident who's maybe not
Mention that
not
so
paying
much.
attention as closely? Yeah.
Maybe with the header, you could be very distinct, like somehow, you know, like this is the school corner. or
School
something.
corner, yeah,
I don't know.
right.
Um, and then maybe utilizing the library. I know a lot of the population that wouldn't necessarily be digital is potentially, you know, like octogenarian or something, and they tend to go to the library a lot. Just a thought.
So I think that more people are digital than we might anticipate, at least on email. So something like a constant contact account where anybody can go and sign up and choose like what frequency and like which communications is helpful. And then that also expands us beyond anybody who's just in this area. So that opens you up to alumni, that opens you up to maybe former educators who aren't here anymore. There's no geographic limitation to the messaging, and people are self-selecting. And I know like my mother-in-law has email, she checks her email a lot. So where the social media might get kind of gray about which platform are people using, are they on it, are they not, how do they engage with that? But email in general, and if they could select. Then with the idea of what is the content that's going out, and it's like you have at least two audiences, right? Potentially three. So one is your internal audience, which is, say your staff, which I think you're probably pretty comfortable handling. You have the community at large. What are the things that we want anybody out there who's interested in the schools to be aware that's going on? Then there's potentially even, like, if we talk about the students as a body for keeping communicated. And I know, like, they'll get a message from their principal or something. My experience in working with marketing, like dedicated marketing professional in higher ed, is that person as a staff member is a fully integrated member of like the senior team. And then it's not on the senior leadership to be telling the marketing person necessarily like, okay, I want you to do this, I want you to do this, I want you to do this. They're in those meetings. And because that person is trained to think that way, they're able to grab the things. They're like, this is a really important thing for us to share in the community. And so I need to talk to this person, and we're going to get a student perspective on this and put it out there. So I know this is not when we want to be thinking about expanding staff, but I see I'm not sure how we get it with somebody that's, if it's just still us pushing it out, because then it's like, well, then we're creating basically the content to push it out. And then all we're really having them do is somebody format it in a newsletter or something. So that's where I'm coming from, but I understand, certainly the expense. But I also see a real advantage to having somebody that is internal and is like literally working with you all day in and day out and knows everything going on.
And so that's like that third party vendor, they were like, no, you don't write it. You send us the ideas, and then we draft it, and then you review it, and then it gets pushed out. So it's similar to that, but they're not sitting in the room with us, hearing whatever topics we're talking about and saying, hey, this is something we need to share out, or things like that. Yeah. So
I think stepping back, I mean, it's clear that like probably our need is both like strategic and tactical, right? And so like, we can all guess at what's the best way to reach a community like ours, but somewhere somebody knows this stuff for a living, right? And they know how to marry the different methods and analyze it and be able to tell you like this many people are opening emails and reading them, this many people are clicking into stuff. I look at, and I have our website up now. I mean, to me as a parent, and I still remember this like very clearly, like when Nate was a freshman, trying to find out what time high school starts, what took me like 20 minutes of like, you would think it would be like something that was easy peasy. It took like 20 minutes to find. And finally I called somebody else who had a kid in high school and was like, dumb question, right? So, I mean, things like I think all of this is an opportunity for us. I think communication, when you think of it less about just like the tactical piece of who's writing articles or sending emails, and more about like what's our strategy to create ourselves as a brand for the community, to like, you know, have open, feed communication to the community in a way that they understand and they want, and vice versa, to be able to hear that. Whoops. You are, yeah.
Just pull it down. Needs more command strips.
Not a 3M commercial. The cinder block's always a challenge.
Right.
I think that like the value, because you think of how much time right now that we spend, you spend, your team spends trying to do this, even if it's just a part-time staff member and not necessarily like a full-time position, you just tend to think it could be remote, it could be an alumnus. It wouldn't necessarily have to be someone who's like every day here, but really like understands all of these, marketing, communications, but really almost like customer engagement. And I'll, flip it into the government, but like, what's our community engagement, family engagement like person? I tend to think, especially for all the initiatives we have forthcoming, that the value of somebody like that, especially if they're well educated in what the rules are and the law is. In the past, when I think we've had really well-intentioned citizens or even internal people, they've gone a little sideways on that stuff. I think always with their heart in the right place, but the communications haven't always, they've crossed the line into like advocating for a levy or things like that just aren't permitted. So I say all that. I think we really ought to consider, and I know it's like asking, fishes and loaves sort of situation, but I tend to think if you look at like our needs and our opportunities, like what's going to give us the most bang for our buck, somebody who's able to communicate like well, whether it's like helping somebody like me have a great experience as a parent and be able to find what I need when I need it, which that I think gives you a good impression of the schools, right? And then that's make me inclined to be more of a engaged and supportive of the schools, all the way down to, how do we tell kind of our story and develop our brand? How do we bring together, frankly, like all the different channels of communication we have now? I mean, if I want to go find a sports schedule, Steve's got the website, but it's different than the website for the school, right? And that's stuff you wouldn't know unless someone told you. So I think all of those things are areas of opportunity for us, but so important, because we know that we can do a better job on social media, and especially like engaging things beyond sports, which I know everybody makes an effort to do, but there's probably all sorts of stories we're still not telling, right? Beyond sports. And we know sports gets told a lot in the papers. So, there's that opportunity. I don't know. I think to me it's a tremendous need. And I would think if there's any way for us to like figure out the fishes and loaves, like I think it would pay for itself over and over again, but frankly make life easier for you guys and hopefully for like the parents and students and community too, in finding out what they need to know.
Said from the beginning was the most important thing. I think what's been changed has been significantly positive compared to the past.
So is there a blend between going with a large firm that's not local, maybe finding there are people locally, I heard them, I've worked with them on different projects, and I hear them talking about exactly that, like this is your click rate, these are the stories, this is how you know and measure the impact and the spread, and you know how many people are reading it and that kind of thing. That is it looking for more like a consultant role on limited, like X number of hours a week. And it's for like a certain time span because we know like, okay, the next 12 months we have this much work. So it's not bringing on a full-time employee. But it is kind of that scope, but it could help with the website, which we've talked about. And I know you all are looking at and doing some things to change, but there's a lot of information that we want to be driving people to easily access the information. And that person, we have expertise in like, oh yeah, this is how you map this out.
I think a good starting point, because I think we all agree that this is something that's needed, and you use the word value, which I think is important. It's worth somebody from the outside do like a communications audit, to tell us like where we're missing or what we're lacking. You know, from the inside, sometimes it's hard to see what you're not doing just because it's the way it's always been done, or just because we're all limited in this, you know, what we know, what we should be doing. So, I know the cost is a concern, but if it's going to bring value, I mean, we're going to need the public going forward with everything that so if there's gaps in what we're doing, which I'm sure there are, somebody from the outside could tell us. Of course, you have to weigh that against people that are also trying to sell you their services, but
I mean, they do.
Well, I mean, if they do a bit, you know, if you put out and let people know and they put together a portfolio and they demonstrate the work so that we know it's kind of like the things that we think we need, or, you know, see some of the work it reflects. I don't know. So there's options. I mean, that's good news.
I think we'll have to make a decision. Do you want something like, I think that when you go buy your communications right from the outside and you're working with like a company that's going to have multiple clients, the good thing is like they've done this before, right? So I mean, the bad thing is like they probably have canned templates. And you know, I think of when I was a lawyer and we went to in private practice and we went to put together a website back when that was cutting edge, right? And you just have these like cookie cutter. I'm sure Beth, you guys think too, like you have these cookie cutter kind of services, or you can engage somebody to do something custom, and but even that, everything's built off templates. And I just wonder if internally, and I guess it really depends on how much we want to we want people to set up things for us that we want to populate versus we just want somebody to like, hey, you know, here's the stuff we're hoping to do in 20 hours. And we know it won't necessarily be everything, but that would be our content, you know, kind of our person internal. And would that be kind of a cool job for like whether it's somebody who's maybe had some time in the workforce and wants to like take a step back a little bit, or vice versa, maybe somebody starting out in the workforce, you know, I don't know. It'd be hard to get a full-time marketing like professional, probably reasonably, but I do wonder if there's people who honestly just want to work part-time and would love to, you know, offer their talents.
Somebody on staff that we could offer a stipend to do the content, but then somebody professionally that we could kind of at least do an odd.
Well, the gentleman you referenced, James, that is in a different district, is he an independent like contractor person, or is he from a company?
He is employed by the district that he works for.
So he didn't come from a communications company. He's just a citizen who has a marketing background who's employed by that district.
Correct. Yeah. Yep. And so that's the other one. I could talk with. We do a lot of contracted services with North Point, so I can talk to them about, is this something that could flow through them? Because maybe there's another district that said, well, we'll pick up the other 20 hours, and now that expands that candidate pool to people looking for full-time work.
Idea.
I know Lorraine County ESC does that for districts over there. So I would have to check. I haven't asked North Point, but so I guess from here, if you want, I can talk with them, try to get an idea of like, what are we talking cost-wise, and then see if we think that's the right way to, you know, invest in that communication, and go from there. So
You have to be kind of careful because if somebody's doing like a website or whatever, anytime you want to
I
good point.
think it's a, fantastic idea, and I agree with, Paul and Stacy that it will add value. Really will. I mean, it's something even before you were here that the previous superintendent, I think, would have loved to have done had there been the funds to do it. To have a communications said, oftentimes
Yeah.
you need a communications person.
I mean, as a group, we identified it.
James, I'm on Sandusky's website now, and they're making reference to a thing called the Ohio School Public Relations Association. I don't know if that's like a place. It sounds like an area where we might want to, like, I mean, I'm sure you have like the big vendors, but maybe there's some people who get involved with that.
All right, so I'll keep exploring options, and I'll circle back and share with the board. Very good.
Awesome. Anything else? Okay, so you go into the executive session for reason of preparing for, conducting, or reviewing negotiations with public employees concerning their compensation or other terms and conditions of their employment.
So moved.
I'll second.
Mr. DeMarco?
Sinners,
Yes.
Mrs. Mast,
Yes.
Okay.